Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of the top 10, top 10 wrestlers you did not know were in Ring of Honor. We're going to keep this to guys that wrestled a match in Ring of Honor, at least one, and we're going to talk about people that you may or may not have remembered wrestled at least once for the company. Now we do know Ring of Honor has been the breeding ground for a lot of the huge stars over the last 20 years. Guys like Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Samoa Joe, Adam Cole, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins, all had one of their first big breaks, or their biggest break, before going on to bigger, greener pastures in Ring of Honor. It could even be said that Ring of Honor was the company that helped lay the groundwork for where AEW is. Even nowadays, at the time of this recording, with Tony Khan, the owner of AEW, also owning Ring of Honor. With all that being said, there's going to be some people on here that thematically you wouldn't think fit in Ring of Honor, legends on the end of their career, and some guys that were, or girls that were in the beginning of their careers. We're going to jump right into this. Number 10, the Necro Butcher. Necro Butcher was that early 2000s deathmatch staple, kind of in the vein of where Nick Gage is now, where he was the guy that was pushing that deathmatch envelope in CZW and carved a real niche out for himself, made a real solid career out of being the deathmatch guy. You wouldn't think a guy like that would be involved in a company like Ring of Honor that's based more on the mat-based. However, he did the Ring of Honor CZW invasion. Then he was involved in what I think is one of the best storylines in Ring of Honor history, the Age of the Fall story. He was part of Age of the Fall with Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, aka Seth Rollins, and some other people that were in and out. Brody Lee would eventually be in the group. Delirious was in the group. Lacey was in the group at one point. It grew. It was an evolving group. But Necro was one of the people there from the beginning. And thematically, you wouldn't think he fit there. Necro had a really fun match with Samoa Joe in Ring of Honor, which I think is one of the great Ring of Honor matches of all time. Absolute guy that's a legend in the business. He doesn't really get talked about because he never went to like Impact or TNA at the time, or WWE. I don't think he could have stretched to fit either of those companies. But for people that watch CZW and watch Ring of Honor back in this time frame, Necro Butcher is a guy that's always going to stick into our mind as a legendary athlete. Now coming from that, our number 9. Talking about legendary athletes, one of the legends in wrestling, Dusty Rhodes. Dusty had, I believe it was just one match where he was part of a multi-man elimination match, but that's enough to get him on our list. Dusty, strangely enough, would pop up in a lot of different places. Most famously, he was in Jim Crockett, Florida Championship Wrestling, his WWF run, WCW, had a short run in ECW. Dusty was the embodiment of a journeyman, and everywhere he went, he was over. Dusty Rhodes is one of the most famous, one of the most popular, one of the biggest fan favorites in the history of wrestling. I love Dusty. He's in my top 10 easily, top 5 easily. Just a great wrestler, and just the pure fact that someone like Dusty Rhodes would show up in Ring of Honor really helped the company prove that they were a place that not only the young up-and-coming talent would be, but you got to see some of the legends of wrestling. Other legends had came through, some that it didn't make this list, like Ricky Steamboat, because he didn't actually wrestle a match. He had an exhibition. Ric Flair made an appearance, and then Ric Flair also had some issues where he stole money from them, kind of, allegedly, I guess. Took a booking and didn't show up and kept the money. Whatever you would call that. Anyway, without being sued, allegedly. Dusty was one of those guys that came there and tried to help, and really did, and put notoriety into the company, helped them grow in a time where they needed that help. Just a fantastic guy, and love to see him on. Our next up, our number 8, MVP, who at the time, or actually, both appeared in Ring of Honor as Antonio Banks and as MVP. MVP, he had a couple matches later. As Antonio Banks, he only had one match in Ring of Honor, and this was during the time that Ring of Honor was paired up with FIP as their quasi-development talent, Full Impact Pro. Gabe Sapolsky was booking both of them, and both companies shared talent. Antonio Banks, aka MVP, was a huge star in the making in Full Impact Pro. And he was bound to be a guy that had a crossover in the Ring of Honor. He's one of those guys, in my opinion, MVP is in the very short list of people that I absolutely believe should have been a world champion and didn't get a chance to be. MVP as a ring talent is stellar. MVP as a talker is stellar. His charisma is off the charts. Everything about him I've enjoyed from the first time I seen him, and the first time would have been during that Antonio Banks run. The only thing that I could think that held him back, which I think would have actually been a positive, is his criminal record. I actually think that if they would have built that up as a guy, hey, look, this guy reformed himself and he made himself a world champion, that's an amazing story to me. It gives hope to people that may have done something stupid early in their life, like MVP, who admits that he did do something stupid early in his life. It gives hope to those people where, and I've seen it, I've had friends, I've had family members that they have a conviction and now it's hard for them to find a job. It's hard for them to keep a job. They're constantly fighting that stigma of something that they may have done when they were in their early 20s, and now they're in their late 30s, and they're still, when they have to put it on their resume, they can't get a job because the job passes them over for someone without a record. And I get it, I do. But there's something to be said about redemption, and I think the redemption story of MVP should have been one that played out. Now, coming from that, our number 7, a guy that's in a redemption arc right now, coming off a battle with alcoholism, and putting in, at the time of this recording, the best wrestling year of his career, Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley, you would be easy to forget ever appearing in Ring of Honor because he only appeared on, I think, 2 or 3 dark matches. I believe it's 2. He might have a third one. I think him and Sami Callihan might have had a dark match together as a team at one point. I couldn't find it, but I seem to have remembered that. It was interesting because at the time he was having these dark matches, I mean, he was really lighting up CZW and putting his name out there. This was right before he was signed up to WWE and became Dean Ambrose and had his run in FCW and then on the main roster and then becoming one of the great wrestlers of all time. It's amazing to see going back that it took so many different eyes to really see him and make a star out of the guy when you knew, watching those old CZW videos, I know that there's people, and there's probably people that are going to watch this video, that could tell you that I sent them those CZW videos of Jon Moxley and said, you got to look at this guy. This guy is doing something amazing. My good friend, and I hopefully he's watching this, he can put in the comments here, Paul Pickett. Paul will probably definitely remember, because I know I sent him tons of Moxley stuff before Moxley got to the Fed, and just said, hey, I think this guy's going to be one of the next big guys in wrestling. But as I could say, I don't want to say I'm a prophet, because there have been guys that I've said are going to be big that didn't end up being big. Trent Acid I thought was going to be huge. He didn't end up being huge. He is to me. I love Trent Acid's work. But anyway, I digress. Just another neat little thing, seeing a guy like this that had to try out when you wouldn't think that he could walk in any company in the world now and be a main event guy. He goes back to WWE, he's a main eventer. He stays with AEW, he's a main eventer. Anytime he shows up in New Japan, he's a main eventer. If he were to go to Impact, he'd be a main eventer. I mean, the guy is cemented now as a main event talent, but it's amazing to think that they're not that long ago, 10 years ago or so, he was a guy that was having trouble getting onto Ring of Honor. And that's just amazing. Coming from that, our number 6, Ruby Soho, or at the time, Heidi Lovelace. Ruby as Heidi Lovelace had one match in Ring of Honor, and I believe it was televised. If not, it's on one of their DVDs. This was during one of the many times that Ring of Honor tried to start or bring a women's division into the company. There was a lot of start-stalls. There was a lot of controversies, a lot of, starting something, then giving up on it, coming back to it, giving up again. Their women's division never really got off the board. The one person, and funny enough, and I didn't wear it because of this, I just happened to be wearing it, Kelly Klein was the one person that I feel really made a star of herself in their division. Maybe Jenny Rose too. Jenny Rose had some awesome matches. Ruby, I don't remember who her match was. I definitely remember seeing her there, but she was part of one of the tournaments or one of the build-ups to a tournament and announced one of the many times that they had a tournament for a new women's champion. It's awesome because Ruby's a person I love. She's kind of lost at the time of this recording in the mix in AEW now. Hopefully when she gets back from injury, she can really prove that she is one of the top women's talent in all the world. And I'm just waiting to see her because she's absolutely amazing. Now going from that, our number 5, Terry Funk. Much like Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk was the epitome of a journeyman. If you have a company that's operated in the last 40 years, he's probably wrestled for your company. He was in Ring of Honor very early on. He was involved with Raven, with CM Punk. I do remember there was a Terry Funk for a CM Punk match that was actually really good, especially knowing how old Terry Funk was at the time. Just a fantastic wrestler, one of the two, in my opinion, one of the two best wrestlers in the history of the world. Him and Ric Flair are both, in my opinion, the two best. I cannot delineate between the two. Each one has their merits of being the best. Each one has their demerits for being the best. But I can't argue that if you tell me one of those two is the best wrestler of all time, I will not argue with you. Much like I said with Dusty Rhodes, him being there to lead credence to a guy like CM Punk, who was really one of the early stalwarts of Ring of Honor, was one of the early things that people turned into Ring of Honor or bought the early DVDs to watch, was to see CM Punk. So him leading, giving that credibility to Punk really helped the company grow and go forward. Just an amazing wrestler, and I could sing the praises of Terry Funk for the next 50 years straight without stopping talking, and he probably will retire 10 more times in that 50 years. Because I don't think the man's ever going to actually retire, and I don't think the man's ever going to die. At least I hope not, because I don't want to know what a world looks like without Terry Funk being in it. Now coming from that, our number 4, another former NWA World Champion, Christian Cage. Christian wrestled 2 matches for Ring of Honor after he was released by WWE. Right at the beginning of his TNA career, he had 1 match. He teamed with Colt Cabana. It slips my mind who they were going up against. And he had a singles match against Christopher Daniels, which, if you think about it for that time frame, is absolutely a legendary match. Christopher Daniels, criminally underrated. A lot of people consider Christian Cage to be underrated. This was really him breaking out and sticking it in the face of WWE, saying, hey, look, I could be a big star too. If you give me a chance, I could be a guy that can run with the ball. He definitely did that in TNA and to a much lesser extent in Ring of Honor. Again, just the fact that during the height of Christian Cage's career, he wrestled 2 matches for Ring of Honor. Not a lot of people talk about that, but obviously it was an amazing part of it. Now from that, our number 3, one of the guys that helped get Ring of Honor off the ground, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie was in the main event of the first Ring of Honor card. This was during a time where he was fired by WWE, and before he got back to WWE, he was let off of WWE for about 1.5 years or so. During that time frame, he did some soul searching, cleaned up his life, and one of the things he did was wrestle for Ring of Honor. And he just put an amazing match on. I can't say enough great things about Eddie Guerrero. He really did help the company get off the ground. A lot of people consider him one of the great wrestlers of all time. Mick Foley, I just heard on one of his podcasts say that the greatest wrestler of all time is Eddie Guerrero. Coming from a guy like Mick Foley, that is high praise. Eddie, just an amazing legend in the wrestling ring. One of the guys that, if you weren't there for the beginning of Ring of Honor, I believe he was only on that first show. If you weren't there for that beginning, you would have never known that he wrestled there. Just an amazing talent. Now going from Eddie, our number 2, another absolute legend, one of the greatest women wrestlers of all time, Mickie James. Mickie James wrestled in Ring of Honor under her Alexis Lurie character. She had a few matches here and there. She was involved in some tag matches, some scrambles. She was a manager for AJ Styles for a little while, or / girlfriend. And you could see the talent there. Much like I said with Jon Moxley, with Ruby Soho, even early in their career as MVP, you could see that this was going to be a star. This was someone that was going to make it a huge splash in wrestling. Again, because she was in that early Ring of Honor where it was still just DVDs and VHSs being traded around. Not a lot of people know about that part of her career. A lot of people remember her being part of The Gathering in TNA, which, yeah, that definitely helped get her on board. But I would be suffice to say that her matches in Ring of Honor were much better than her TNA matches, hence why I think she deserves to be on this list, and hence why I think a lot of people forgot about it too. Now, before we get to our number one, I do a little thing here on my top 10s called the best of the rest, basically stuff that was considered for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, the Great Muta. Great Muta came into Ring of Honor during a time where they were trying to branch out and partner with different wrestling companies, and he wrestled a match in Ring of Honor, just one, or actually two, because he came back for the Battle Royal at their Madison Square Garden show. Much like I said with Terry Funk and Dusty Rhodes, here, and Eddie Guerrero even, here we have another legend. Eddie Guerrero more was in the height of his career. Here we have another legend who was towards the tail end of their career, but lent their star power, lent their credibility to help bring Ring of Honor to a different level. Just an amazing wrestler. At the time of recording, we're just a few months out from his actual retirement. I'm absolutely going to miss seeing the Great Muta, even though now he's not as mobile as he was in his height of his career. It's still amazing to see Muta or Keiji Muto. Either version, they're both amazing to me. I love seeing both of them. One of my absolute favorites. Definitely a guy that deserves all the accolades he gets, plus probably more. Now, last but not least, on our best of the rest, a guy that you actually probably remember being in Ring of Honor because he had won a tag championship there, Jeff Hardy. But for this list, we're not talking about Jeff Hardy. We're talking about his alter ego, Will-O-the-Wisp. A lot of people will look fondly on Willow in the Broken Universe. A lot of people look negatively on the other appearances of Willow, whether it be his TNA run when he was Willow, or this appearance here, where the fans absolutely destroyed him. This was 2003. Jeff was, how can I say, not in a great place. He comes to ring in full Willow mask, wrestles in the Willow gimmick. The fans destroyed it. They absolutely hated it. One of his, I think he was a three-way. One of their opponents was Fast Eddie, and I'm trying to remember who the other opponent was, but the fans destroyed him. Absolutely one of the times that the Ring of Honor fans absolutely turned on somebody, because you would think, at that time frame, I think it was 2003, 2004, Jeff Hardy showing up at Ring of Honor, the Ring of Honor fans would have ate him up, because he's Jeff Hardy, and the style that he wrestles is very conducive to something that the Ring of Honor fans liked. If they would have got Jeff Hardy, they probably would have loved it. Because they got Willow, not so much. With that being said, before we get into our number one, please smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and for our number one person, or actually number one people you did not know were wrestled in Ring of Honor, the Insane Clown Posse. Yes, ICP had a tag team match in Ring of Honor early on. They wrestled Outcast Killers, who were Armand Tortuga and Diablo. I forget what Diablo's last name was. Trust me, they wrestled. They wrestled a tag match that famously they did not get paid. They just showed up and seen if they could get on the card. I don't think it was even put on the DVD. It wasn't put on until later onto the DVD even. This was another case of the fans totally destroying it, which again was a little surprising, because knowing ICP and how tied they are to independent wrestling with their JCW promotion they have. They were in WWF, they were in ECW, WCW, TNA. Yeah, I get it a bit. The Juggalos aren't exactly the Ring of Honor crowd, and the Juggalos and the way they wrestle, it would have probably been a better fit in XPW or CZW, which they did do things with, I believe both of them. I know for a fact XPW. I want to say they did some with CZW too. But the fan base didn't quite go for it. And then the match they had wasn't great. And I'm a big fan of ICP. I like their music. I like what they do charitably. They're a very charitable band. They do a lot of things for their fans and underprivileged people. I just don't think it was a good fit. And the fact that they had a not so great match, which I think didn't make the home release, at least on the first version of it, probably why a lot of people forget that they were in Ring of Honor. While that being said, let me know what you think in the comments. Again, smash like, share, subscribe. If you made it all the way to the end, Let me know who you think the most surprising person in Ring of Honor was. It doesn't have to be someone on my list. If you think it's surprising that Sami Zayn was a Ring of Honor wrestler, if you think it's surprising that Cody Rhodes wrestled for Ring of Honor, let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.